if you're anything like us, you've probably felt it recently. That specific gnawing fatigue,
Mm.
the one that comes from working harder, maybe earning more, but somehow you're constantly falling behind.
Yeah, you get a raise and poof, it's gone.
It's gone. The cost of living just ate it before the ink was even dry on your bank statement.
Mhm.
Why does it feel like you're perpetually running on an economic treadmill that just keeps speeding up?
That is the defining question of our generation, I think. And frankly, millions of people all over the world are asking it. That feeling of being in financial quicksand, it's incredibly common.
Right.
And the rich collection of source material we dove into this week offers a really stark, but I think ultimately empowering answer.
Mm.
It feels that way because, well, structurally and intentionally, the current system is designed to make it difficult for the average person to succeed.
To succeed and, I guess, accumulate any kind of lasting, meaningful wealth. So our mission today is not just to sit here and, complain about the system. It's to break down this highly specific two-part strategy, a comprehensive life hack, if you will, that the material proposes for adapting and becoming what the authors call a winner in this environment.
Hmm.
We're looking for a path to not just survive, but to actually thrive and reclaim sovereignty over our finances and our health.
And this is a deep dive into self-mastery. The sources argue that winning this whole game, it requires mastering two essential qualities,
Okay.
and they're deeply intertwined, But we often treat them as completely separate things.
Right, like your money is over here and your health is over there.
Exactly. And those two things are, you need to be not poor and you need to be not sick.
Mm-hmm.
We found a profound connection between financial debasement, the core mechanism eroding your wallet, and the modern health crisis, which the sources dramatically label fiat food.
Fiat food.
Yeah.
Okay, we're definitely going to have to unpack that one.
Well, we will. We're going to map out the clear, foundational, and actionable steps for mastering both.
Before we jump into the strategy, though, we have to grasp the sheer scale of the financial environment we're in to really set the stage for how aggressive this financial debasement is. We need to look at the history the sources provided.
Yeah.
Because this isn't just about things getting a little more expensive. It's about this exponential debilitating decay of the currency itself.
That's the essential starting point.
Mm.
To illustrate this decay, the source material cited a fascinating, really compelling example. It involves a simple, everyday necessity, a bowl of street noodles.
A bowl of noodles?
A bowl of noodles, yeah. Over 84 years, starting back in 1941 and projecting all the way to 2025.
A basic unit of consumption.
Oh,
Okay.
In 1941, that bowl of noodles cost what amounted to about 5 satang, which was a tiny fraction of a U.S. penny at the time.
So basically negligible, almost free.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
You would barely notice that cost in your daily expenses.
Right.
Okay, now fast forward to 1997. That same bowl of noodles had jumped exponentially to 20 bahts, or about 2,000 satang. That's already a massive, undeniable leap in cost.
A huge leap.
But the real alarm rings when you look at the trajectory up to today, to 2025. The cost has tripled again, settling around 60 baht, or 6,000 satang.
Okay, let's pause and unpack the math here because the numbers are just jaw-dropping. If you compare 1941 to 2025, the cost of that single item, that same bowl of noodles, has increased 1,200 times.
1,200 times.
That is a stunning 120,000% increase over 84 years. When you see inflation measured not in these, easily digestible little percentages, but in multiples like that, it just shows you this crushing reality of financial degradation we're all dealing with.
And the projection suggests it could easily double again to 100 or 120 baht within the next decade.
Wow.
This is the baseline reality we have to accept before we can even begin to strategize how to overcome it. We're not just fighting the ordinary cost of doing business. We're fighting constant, rapid currency decay. It's the silent tax that takes from the future to pay for today.
And the impact isn't just mathematical, right? It's emotional. I mean, think about the energy required for a person in 1941 to earn 5 satang versus the energy a modern worker needs to earn 60 baht today.
It's a totally different world.
The amount of our lives we have to spend working just to afford that basic necessity has just exploded. That is the feeling of running on a treadmill.
Exactly. The source material emphasizes that this massive effort to reward imbalance is the fuel for that economic fatigue we started with. And that brings us right into part one, understanding the mechanics of what they call the fiat trap.
All right, so let's start with a clear, in-depth definition of this fiat world. The material paints a picture of a system where fiat money, So
Right.
currency not backed by a physical thing like gold, but just by government decree, is inherently designed to lose value constantly.
Yeah, the authors are incredibly blunt about it. They state that fiat money is fundamentally about using future wealth today
Okay.
and then passing that compounded, inevitable burden onto future generations.
This is a debt machine.
They call the entire system a ticking time bomb. And that analogy really holds up because the debt that's generated through this mechanism, it never truly vanishes. It just gets pushed forward in time and magnified by compounding interest.
And this mechanism is exactly why the true rate of inflation is so much more dangerous than the official numbers we always hear about.
We're constantly told by central authorities that the government targets, what, around 2% or 3%? CPI, Consumer Price Index, inflation?
Which sounds manageable, right?
Yeah.
Almost benign. They frame it as a sign of a healthy, growing economy.
But those official figures, while they're useful for certain economic models, they often fail to capture the actual cost erosion we feel in our daily lives.
You mean for the things we actually have to buy?
Exactly. The cost of non-discretionary items like groceries, housing, healthcare, education. The CPI baskets are often adjusted. They'll remove high inflation items or substitute them for cheaper alternatives, which artificially lowers the official rate.
So the official numbers are measuring something, but they're not measuring our ability to buy things, our purchasing power.
Precisely. Our source material suggests that the real inflation experienced by the consumer, the rate that actually matters for your long-term purchasing power and personal stability, is closer to a sustained compounded rate of 6 to 8%.
6 to 8. Wow.
And this discrepancy is the first major aha moment for anyone learning this. If your savings, your traditional bank account, or even many of your basic investments aren't consistently generating a compounded return above that 6 to 8%,
You're losing.
you are actually losing ground every single year, regardless of what the news anchor tells you. That 6-8% is the hurdle rate just for survival.
That reframes the entire game. I mean, if 6-8% is the baseline just to stay even, how can we possibly expect to accumulate wealth? Which leads to the logical question. If this system is so fundamentally corrosive to most people, why on earth has it persisted for 54 years?
The sources offer a clear, though a deeply cynical explanation.
I'm ready.
It persists because it benefits those in power, and it's been around too long to dismantle easily. The authors compare its existence to, like, an unnoticed cancer spreading throughout the system.
Okay.
At first, you don't realize the severity, but by the time the symptoms show up, like this widespread financial fatigue and constant crisis, the cancer has metastasized. Reversing it suddenly, cutting the system off, is almost impossible now because the financial architecture of the entire world is deeply embedded in this fiat mechanism.
And it stays embedded because specific groups benefit wildly from it. So who are the primary beneficiaries of all this continuous money printing and debasement?
There are two main groups. First, you have those near the source.
Near the source of the money.
Exactly. This refers to core institutions like the major central banks, particularly the U.S. Federal Reserve, and entities, major banks, Wall Street firms, that are close to the printing press. They receive the newly printed money first.
So if the Fed creates $1 trillion, those entities get that money before anyone else. But why does that timing matter? Why isn't it neutral?
It's completely non-neutral. This is explained through something called the Cantillon effect, which is a key concept we have to understand.
Okay.
When new money is created, it enters the economy through the financial system first. Those initial recipients can then go purchase assets, stocks, real estate, commodities, before the inflation caused by that new money has fully rippled through the rest of the economy.
So before the prices have adjusted.
Exactly. Before it's reflected in market prices, they essentially get to buy the assets at a discount before price discovery catches up.
They get to front-run the inflation that their own actions are causing. So if I'm a middle-class worker waiting for my annual raise, by the time that newly printed money finally trickles down to my paycheck, prices at the grocery store, for rent, for a home, they've already been driven up by the capital that was injected at the top.
Exactly. You are the last one to the party, and you're paying inflated prices with currency that's already depreciated relative to the assets the initial recipients bought. This constantly widens the wealth gap. It makes it almost impossible to catch up if you're only trading your time for fiat currency.
That is just a staggering concept. I mean, so what about the second group? Who else is benefiting?
The second group is, well, it's the wealthy and the knowledgeable.
The people who know the rules.
Exactly. The people who know how to play the game.
Hmm.
These are individuals or family offices who aren't necessarily printing the money, but they understand the system's inherent rules. They realize that saving in fiat is a losing proposition, so they play strategically.
So what do they do?
They're constantly earning, innovating, and investing in non-fiat assets or using mechanisms like debt and leverage in ways that consistently generate returns far exceeding that true 6 to 8% inflation rate. They are masters of asset appreciation because they know wealth is stored in things that government can't just arbitrarily print more of.
And the sources clearly state that if these two powerful groups, the ones controlling the mechanism and the ones mastering it, if they were suddenly disadvantaged, the fiat system would just disappear.
It would disappear very quickly, yes. Their self-interest is the engine that keeps the treadmill running for everyone else.
That's the core thesis.
That is the core thesis. The sources assert that the current structure isn't an accident. It's designed to maintain control and dependency. And this control is exerted through all sorts of mechanisms. Laws, regulations, the standardized education that often ignores personal finance.
Oh, yeah.
And even the basic societal structure that demands we trade our time and energy for this rapidly depreciating currency. This dependency allows those in power to control our financial lives, our behaviors, our choices. It keeps the majority focused on short-term survival rather than long-term sovereignty.
That's a compelling, I mean, even provocative argument for radically rethinking self-sovereignty. If the trap is so pervasive, what's the antidote? The source material is not shy about its proposed solution. It introduces Bitcoin, BTC, as the central counter tool.
The antidote to fiat money, yeah. Bitcoin is presented as the solution to the debasement problem because its supply is fixed. It's capped at 21 million coins. It cannot be inflated away by some arbitrary decree or a political whim or a central bank policy.
It's scarce and predictable.
It's scarce, predictable, and transparent. The overall strategy we're talking about today isn't to flee the fiat world entirely because we still need it. For daily transactions, utility payments, liquidity,
Right, you can't escape it completely.
you can't. But the strategy is to leverage its convenience while using Bitcoin as the untouchable long-term wealth accumulation tool. It's about building a hybrid strategy.
So we're learning to live inside the system, but we're diverting our surplus energy, our savings, into something that can't be debased, a financially fireproof strategy.
Precisely. We need to transition our focus from earning more fiat to saving in an asset that retains its value over the long term.
Okay, let's transition into pillar one, becoming not poor. The core principle here is highly motivating. It's that winning isn't about working the hardest or finding the highest paying job. It's about understanding the rules of the game and preventing the system from consuming your most valuable resources, your time, your freedom, your energy.
It's about being smart, not just busy.
Right.
And being smart starts with, well, acknowledging the reality of your current situation. The first step is fundamental, but it's often avoided because it requires facing some uncomfortable truths.
Let me guess. Tracking your spending.
Financial awareness through income and expense tracking. You got it.
This sounds so tedious, the financial equivalent of a trip to the dentist, but the sources emphasize it as the primary step for a reason. You can't intelligently allocate depreciating fiat money if you don't know precisely where it's flowing in and where it's hemorrhaging out.
You have to track everything. And for a substantial period, 3 to 6 months. Use an app, a spreadsheet, a notebook, whatever, but get the empirical data. People are often shocked, just shocked, when they realize how much they spend on small, habitual purchases.
The daily coffee, the subscription services you forgot you had.
The impulse buys. Without this data, you're just rowing in the dark. You will inevitably continue to overspend or undersave, guided by feeling rather than fact.
I think the emotional hurdle here is massive because tracking requires confronting your bad habits, which often provide that cheap dopamine hit we're going to talk about later.
It does, but the material stresses that awareness is power. Once we have the data, step 2 is about offense and defense. Increase resources and reduce debt slavery.
Debt slavery, that's a strong term.
It is. We need to focus on increasing income, absolutely, but equally, and perhaps more important, is drastically reducing unnecessary debt. The sources are extremely harsh on debt, calling it a form of slavery to the fiat system.
And why is that? Why so harsh?
Because it multiplies the difficulty of building wealth several times over.
But wait a minute. Traditional financial advice tells us that having a mortgage or using a credit card responsibly for points and, building a credit score is essential to financial success. Doesn't the source material acknowledge good debt?
That is a great question, and it's a point of friction. The source material argues that in a system with 6–8% true inflation, any debt beyond highly strategic business or asset-backed loans makes you a servant to the system's volatility.
Even a mortgage?
A mortgage, for example, ties you down to an obligation payable in ever harder to earn fiat. It reduces your mobility and your freedom. If you have high-interest debt, you're just serving the system and rapidly destroying your future wealth potential. The key behavioral adjustment here is a ruthless focus on practicing delayed gratification.
Only purchase necessities.
Only necessities. You have to avoid the siren call of consumer credit if you want to be a financial winner.
Okay, so we consolidate, attack, and eliminate that high-interest debt first. That brings us to step 3, smart fiat allocation, liquidity. If fiat money is constantly losing 6–8% of its value, we should only hold enough of it for what we absolutely need.
For necessary liquidity and emergency protection, yes. We need to create specific protected pools.
So what are those pools?
The sources suggest dividing your necessary fiat into 2 minimum sacred pools. Pool 1 is your monthly expenses, and this is calculated precisely from the tracking you did in step 1. This covers rent, utilities, essential food, things like that. It should be just enough to cover immediate needs without leaving a large surplus to be eroded by inflation.
And cool, too.
That's the emergency fund. This is the readily accessible reserve that must cover 3 to 6 months of your calculated monthly expenses.
And this is a really crucial distinction that the sources stressed.
Oh, absolutely. The emergency fund must be kept in fiat currency or a stable, highly liquid equivalent like a high-yield savings account or something similar.
Why not in something like Bitcoin if it's the better long-term asset?
Because volatility kills emergency planning. If you have a financial emergency, a sudden medical bill, a car repair, job loss, you need immediate access to money at a stable price. Volatile assets like Bitcoin, while they're excellent for long-term growth, are totally unsuitable for emergency liquidity. You could be forced to sell during a market crash, locking in a huge loss just when you need the money most.
So the emergency fund is your shield.
It's absolute protection against the chaos of the fiat world. It is not an investment vehicle.
Protection, not speculation. That clarity is essential. Okay, now we get to the core of the long-term wealth strategy. Step 4, long-term savings and retirement using the BTC strategy. This is the transformation where we move our surplus energy from depreciating fiat into non-debasable wealth.
And the method advocated is simple, powerful, and requires zero market timing. DCA, or dollar cost averaging. You set a strict, disciplined monthly minimum contribution. The sources gave an example minimum of roughly $30 USD, but the dollar amount is less important than the consistent commitment.
The discipline is non-negotiable here. The material stresses that this monthly habit, the sheer mechanical repetition of it, determines your future success. Unless it's a life-or-death emergency, you should not stop.
This process requires a significant mental shift away from instant gratification to long-term vision.
Absolutely.
And to maintain momentum, the source advises setting goals. Don't start by aiming for some impossibly large portfolio that you can't even visualize. Start small and achievable.
Like what?
Aim for 0.01 BTC first, then 0.1 BTC, then maybe 1 BTC. Achieving these smaller goals provides skin in the game, it builds confidence, and it gives you the energy to keep pushing toward larger retirement goals. It turns this daunting task into a series of achievable quests.
But saving in a non-state controlled asset comes with a new responsibility, right? Namely, security. This is the price of sovereignty. How do we keep this long-term wealth safe outside the traditional banking system?
The safest and easiest method for most people accumulating a significant amount is secure self-custody using a hardware wallet.
Okay, what's that?
It's this tiny device that keeps your private keys, your access code to your Bitcoin, completely offline. That means hackers can't reach them through the internet.
Okay, so we're talking about self-custody and hardware wallets, which sounds fantastic for sovereignty. But that also means if I lose that seed phrase, those 12 or 24 words that back up the wallet, I'm completely ruined. Isn't that a massive, scary responsibility to place on the average person? Most people trust their bank implicitly to handle this.
It is a massive responsibility, and we have to acknowledge that fear. That is the trade-off. You're trading the convenience of the bank, which can fail or be subject to arbitrary government seizure, for the complete sovereignty and security of being your own bank.
Wow.
And the source material is unequivocal. The single most vital piece of security is protecting your seed phrase. If you lose that seed, you permanently lose access to all your funds. No one, not a company, not a government, can help you recover them. That seed phrase is the key to the castle.
So the discipline you use every month to buy Bitcoin must be matched by the paranoia you use to protect those 12 or 24 words.
That's a great way to put it. It is a liberating yet terrifying form of freedom.
And speaking of long-term vision, how should we view the savings goal in terms of time?
This has to be approached with a generational view. You have to think over decades, 10, 20, 30 years. And the sources found this practice liberating
How so?
because it allows you to completely ignore the short-term price volatility, the daily ups and downs, and crucially ignore the pronouncements of figures like the Fed chairman or global presidents. When you're focused on decades, their momentary statements about interest rates or economic forecasts just become irrelevant noise. They can't diminish the fundamental mathematical scarcity of the asset.
That is true financial freedom right there. The freedom to stop caring about their political machinations and just focus on the long-term fixed supply schedule.
Absolutely. Now, let's talk briefly about Step 5, which is marked as optional and advanced fiat integration. This is a plan for maybe 5 to 10 years out, once you've accumulated substantial BTC wealth and you've reached some level of mastery.
The famous buy, borrow, die strategy, adapted for this context. For many, this sounds like highly complex maneuvering. Why is borrowing fiat against your asset rather than selling it the preferred strategy for the wealthy?
It's all about tax efficiency and continued compounding. The idea is to use a small percentage of your Bitcoin, maybe up to 20% of your portfolio, as collateral to take out fiat loans. When you borrow against an appreciating asset, that loan is typically not a taxable event.
Right. But if you sold it,
If you sold the Bitcoin to generate cash, you would likely trigger a capital gains tax. By borrowing, you get the cash liquidity you need for major purchases or daily life, but your underlying asset continues to grow tax-free. And then when you pass away, the asset can be passed on or the tax liability can be minimized, hence the die part of the strategy.
and we're seeing major established institutions already exploring how to facilitate this, it suggests this is quickly becoming a mainstream financial strategy for the technologically sophisticated.
They are. It shows the institutional maturity of the market is evolving to facilitate this. However, and this is a big however, the source material correctly stresses that this is an advanced optional strategy. It should only be pursued when you have significant BTC wealth and when viable, transparent, and trustworthy products exist to facilitate such loans with minimal risk.
So for now, the focus should remain solely on disciplined accumulation and security.
Exactly.
Okay, finally, let's address the difference between saving and investing in this new framework. This was also listed as optional.
Investment is supplemental, and it's inherently risky. It must be strictly separate from your long-term DCA retirement pot. If you choose to invest, maybe allocate a small fixed portion, say 10% of your funds, to ventures outside of your primary saving strategy.
The sources strongly suggest that for newcomers, simply stacking BTC is sufficient and easier than trying to vet complex investments. But if you do choose to invest, what's the key mistake to avoid, given that 6–8% true inflation rate?
The main pitfalls are mixing your investment and savings pots, which just ruins your long-term discipline, not tracking your results, and most crucially, choosing assets that ultimately fail to beat that 6–8% true inflation rate.
Right.
If an investment returns 5% annually, you still lost 1 to 3% of your purchasing power. Despite feeling like you made money, you worked for a loss.
That reframes the entire definition of success. And the sources make a highly provocative argument here, suggesting that the simple and foolish strategy of just buying and holding Bitcoin often yields better results than many traditional assets that require a ton of effort.
They do. They argue that assets like residential rentals or even certain business ventures, they require massive effort management, repairs, taxes, compliance, and may, in the long run, only perform as poorly as printed fiat money.
Meaning they barely keep pace with that 6–8% inflation, but they eat up your time and energy.
Immense amounts of your time and energy. Bitcoin saving, in comparison, is simply executed, secured, and requires you to do nothing but wait. The message is clear. Prioritize the simple, secure anti-debasement tool first. Only risk time and capital on complex investments if they can convincingly crush that 6–8% hurdle rate.
Hmm. Okay, we've spent a lot of time on how the debasement of currency affects your wallet and your future. But this concept of sovereignty extends beyond the financial. It seems like the core message here is self-sovereignty, whether that's financial or physical. Speaking of which, let's look at what the sources call the fiat food crisis.
Yes, we have to transition now to Pillar 2, health mastery becoming not sick.
Mm,
The source material makes a powerful and frankly unsettling link here. Financial wealth is utterly pointless if poor health leads to premature death or expensive, ongoing medical dependence on the very system you're trying to escape.
right. Sickness is expensive.
Incredibly expensive, both in time and in fiat. So health preservation is central to winning the long-term game.
So we need to identify the enemy in the physical realm, which the sources term ultra-processed food, UPF, or poetically fiat food. Just as fiat money is a debased form of wealth that loses value, fiat food is a debased form of nutrition that steals health. How do we define it simply?
UPF refers to foods that are heavily refined and engineered. If you look at the ingredients list, you'll find substances not typically found in a home kitchen. Industrial flavorings, color stabilizers, chemical preservatives, technical INS numbers,
Things you can't pronounce.
right, or ingredients whose original form is unrecognizable. Think sausages, fast food, most packaged snacks, sweetened beverages, instant noodles, and many mass-produced condiments and cereals. If it has a long shelf life and tastes unnaturally good, it's probably fiat food.
And the sources point out that this is a relatively new phenomenon, right? This hasn't been around forever, which is kind of counterintuitive for something so pervasive in our diet.
That is the crucial historical context. UPF has emerged only in the last 50 years, which, again, aligns almost perfectly with the era of the fiat standard. The drive for mass production, long shelf life, and extremely low cost drove food manufacturers to chemically process what the sources starkly call industrial residue and waste.
That is a highly provocative claim, industrial residue. Can you give us a few specific examples from the material on what they mean by this history of manufacturing food from waste?
Yes, and this is where the history becomes deeply disturbing. They reference the origin of certain common food components. Substances like margarine, for instance, were historically derived from highly refined coal grease in industrial factory settings.
Wait, coal grease?
Coal grease. Or consider certain common thickeners and fillers used today that originated from the sludge or byproducts left over after other industrial filtration processes like oil refinement. These substances were initially inedible, but through intensive multi-stage chemical processing, they were re-engineered to be palatable, stabilized, and used to create cheap, mass-produced food that wouldn't spoil on a shelf for months.
So the primary driver was cost reduction and shelf stability, never nutrition.
Never nutrition or health.
That is profoundly unsettling, and it leads to an equally disturbing modern problem, the research conflict. If these massive companies profit from making food this way, who is funding the research that tells us whether it's safe or not?
Exactly. The disturbing finding is that much of the research related to food technology, safety, and nutritional content is sponsored by the very multinational companies that produce and profit from UPF.
So a massive conflict of interest.
An enormous inherent conflict of interest. It is highly unlikely that research funded by a beverage giant will ever conclude that daily consumption of highly sweetened drinks causes major health risks. This mechanism ensures that findings rarely, if ever, indicate danger or major health risks associated with their products, reinforcing this lie that this food is safe in moderation.
So if fiat food is chemically engineered, how does our body, which evolved over millions of years, respond to it? This brings us to the fundamental biological mismatch.
Our human bodies evolved to eat whole, natural food that required effort and time. When you eat a whole food item, like an apple, the fiber requires substantial chewing, and that fiber acts like a net, blocking the rapid, sudden absorption of sugar into the bloodstream. Digestion is slow.
Right. It takes time.
It starts with the mechanical action of the mouth. It triggers satiety hormones in the stomach and then slowly releases nutrients into the bloodstream.
But UPF bypasses all those natural satiety and regulatory signals we spent millennia developing.
Completely. UPF is engineered for rapid absorption. When you consume a sweetened drink, a refined cereal, or a highly processed snack, the body gets a massive sudden sugar or fat spike. This provides an instant, addictive dopamine rush in the reward center of the brain.
The cheap dopamine.
The cheap dopamine. But because the food often lacks the fiber, protein, and natural structure that triggers long-term fullness, it leads to overconsumption and constant cravings, sometimes just an hour after eating. The sources explicitly compare this physiological mechanism to drug addiction. You chase the rapid rush, not the actual nutrition.
And the food scientists aren't just stumbling into this, they're optimizing the addiction
Oh,
process.
they're optimizing it, yes. Food scientists use extensive research to engineer UPF to hit the bliss point.
The bliss point.
That's the optimal ratio of sweet, salty, and fat that maximizes pleasure and consumption, pushing us far past the point of nutritional necessity. Think of it like this. They find the perfect combination of texture, fat, and sugar that makes your brain light up like a pinball machine. If it's too sweet, you stop. If it's too bland, you stop. They engineer it right in the middle so your body says, I need more, before your conscious brain can veto the decision.
So our self-control collapses.
When the brain is constantly seeking that cheap dopamine hit, our self-control collapses, leading to long-term health decline.
And what has been the long-term societal outcome of the last 50 years of exponential UPF consumption, which coincides with the fiat standard?
The sources highlight a clear, tragic correlation. Citing the U.S. as an early example, as UPF consumption became normalized and dominant in the food supply, there was an exponential, shocking rise in NCD's non-communicable diseases,
Likewise.
like type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, chronic kidney disease, fatty liver disease, and various forms of cancer. Fiat food makes us reliant on the medical system, which itself is often heavily tied into the debt and insurance mechanisms of the fiat economy.
Yay.
It's a dependency loop.
This is truly a two-pronged attack on sovereignty, financial and physical. The source material included a powerful personal anecdote on how realizing this link provided a physical cure that years of medication could not. Let's take a minute to really explore that story.
This was a pivotal moment in the source material. The speakers shared their 2-year struggle with irritable bowel syndrome, or chronic IBS. They had persistent, debilitating abdominal pain, discomfort, and significant digestive issues that severely impacted their quality of life.
And they went to doctors.
Oh, yeah. They sought medical help, saw specialists, used various temporary medications to manage the flare-ups, but the symptoms never completely disappeared. Doctors often attributed IBS to stress or unclear factors, saying it was something they'd just have to manage for the rest of their life.
But the breakthrough came when they connected the dots between their chronic symptoms and their daily consumption of these engineered foods.
Absolutely. After studying fiat food and the massive impact of chemical additives and refined ingredients on gut biome health, they decided to completely overhaul their diet. They drastically modified what they ate, focusing solely on whole, unprocessed ingredients and ruthlessly eliminating all forms of UPF. The instant noodles, the packaged sauces, the sugary drinks.
And what happened?
The result was transformative. The chronic IBS symptoms disappeared entirely within a few weeks. It was a direct, undeniable validation that for many chronic issues, the food we put in our bodies, the fiat food, is the root cause, not just a mitigating factor that requires constant medication.
That story is incredibly important because it flips the narrative from, I need a doctor to fix my symptoms, to, I need to control what I consume to eliminate the cause. It's the ultimate expression of health sovereignty. So, what does this all mean? We've outlined the problem, exposed the systemic traps, and discussed the philosophical approach to sovereignty. Now, let's turn these insights into immediate, concrete actions you can take today for both your wallet and your health. This is where we move from theory to execution.
Let's start with the financial side actions to become not poor. These are small steps that build non-negotiable discipline.
1. Start tracking immediately. Don't delay this step. Begin recording every single source of income and every dollar of expenditure for at least 1 full month, preferably 3. Use this raw data to build your baseline monthly budget and, more importantly, identify the specific, unnecessary money leaks that are eroding your purchasing power.
Remember, awareness is the first defense against the system.
Exactly. 2. Practice delayed spending. For any non-essential purchase over a small threshold, say $50 or $100, deliberately delay the decision by 24 to 48 hours. This simple technique interrupts the impulse buying feedback loop, reduces unnecessary consumer debt, and gives you time to assess whether that purchase truly aligns with your long-term goals.
Or whether it's just a cheap hit of dopamine the system wants you to buy into. 3. Establish DCA discipline. If you're ready and comfortable, commit to a small, regular monthly investment into a non-debasable asset like Bitcoin. Start with a tiny, achievable goal like 0.01 BTC and make the discipline non-negotiable.
Right. It's far better to contribute $30 consistently every month than to try to time the market with large, sporadic contributions. The consistency is the primary asset you're building.
And 4. Secure your savings. If you are using a non-custodial strategy for long-term savings, immediately investigate hardware wallets. Learn the safety protocols for securely backing up and sparing your seed phrase, and store it physically in multiple highly secure locations. We cannot stress this enough. You're taking on the responsibility of the bank, and losing the seed means losing the funds forever.
Okay, switching gears to health actions to become not sick and master your physical existence. These require the same discipline as financial saving.
1. Flip the card. Adopt the 90-10 rule and change your shopping habit. Aim for 90% clean, whole, unprocessed food, allowing yourself 10% for indulgence. And crucially, change your shopping environment. Stop relying on convenience store trips, which are just dominated by UPF, and prioritize visits to supermarkets, farmers markets, or local butchers for fresh produce, fresh meats, and dairy.
Prioritize ingredients over packaged goods.
That's it. 2. Avoid the biggest offenders. Identify and drastically reduce consumption of the highest UPF items we mentioned. Instant noodles, all sweetened drinks, packaged chips and snacks, sausages, ham, and heavily processed meats. Also, the sources specifically caution against overly burnt or charred foods from grilling, as the chemical compounds created pose a significant long-term risk.
Okay.
3. Prioritize gut health. The gut is key to overall health and mental well-being. Incorporate natural probiotics like kimchi, sauerkraut, or homemade yogurt, and ensure high consumption of prebiotics. That's fiber from fresh vegetables, which feeds the good bacteria. Your plate ratio should heavily prioritize high protein and fiber intake, scaling back significantly on refined carbohydrates.
A crucial practical health tip that often goes unheeded was shared in the source material: avoiding reheating food repeatedly.
This was a stark warning. The source shared a cautionary anecdote about a person who developed chronic health issues, including colon cancer, attributed to the habit of consistently saving and reheating leftover meals multiple times. The advice is simple. If you can't eat it in 1 or 2 days, it's safer to dispose of it than risk the long-term health consequences just to save a small amount of money.
Health must outweigh the cheap savings.
Absolutely. 4. Hydration and sleep. Aim for a minimum of 2 liters of water daily. Use a 2L bottle and commit to finishing it by the end of the day. This provides visual tracking and removes the guesswork. And aim for consistent, refreshing, protected sleep. 6 to 8 hours is the target. Quality sleep is essential for hormonal balance, recovery, and clear thinking, which directly aids financial discipline.
And finally, 5. Move for mood and stack your health. We need to be intentional about physical activity. Commit to the minimum target of 150+ minutes of cardio per week.
And view exercise as stacking health, just as you stack BTC for wealth. The sources draw this powerful comparison between expensive dopamine, the sustained feeling of well-being and mood elevation you get post-workout, and keep dopamine, which is that fleeting, instant rush from sugar or impulse buying.
Choose the expensive, sustainable dopamine source.
Yes, that physical discipline will bleed into your financial life, making all those financial steps so much easier to execute.
Okay, let's bring it all together.
To synthesize the core message of this deep dive, we are currently living inside a vast, complex system designed for dependency financially through constant currency debasement and physically through the engineering of addictive, low-cost foods. The system demands that you trade your time for depreciating currency and your health for convenience.
And the path to becoming a winner isn't about fighting the system head-on in the streets. It's about radical self-awareness and adaptation. We use the best aspects of the fiat world, its convenience, its access to information, while securing our future through the antidote of non-debasable wealth and achieving self-sufficiency by ruthlessly eliminating fiat food from our diet.
The sources make it clear that the controllers of this game, well, they do not care about the majority. Your only way to succeed is to understand the rules, recognize what they want you to do, which is to stay dependent, working harder for less, and getting sicker from cheap food, and then actively choose not to play that specific role.
The winner is not the busiest or the wealthiest, but the person who understands the rules and adapts, focusing their finite energy on what can't be taken away from them.
And this leads us to our final, provocative closing thought built on everything we discussed today. Since the system actively promotes dependency, consumption, and the erosion of your energy, consider this. What is the single most valuable resource, beyond money or health, that financial freedom and health sovereignty grant you access to?
The answer, hinted at throughout the source material and reinforced by the strategies we discussed, isn't just security, it's time and choice. The freedom to decide how you spend your day, what you put in your body, and whose narratives you choose to ignore. That is the ultimate prize in this debased world.
We encourage you to reflect on your consumption habits, both financially and physically, and start the adaptation process today. Your future self will thank you for gaining that time and that choice.